Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is actually the last one for season 1. It's been an amazing year doing all those episodes. I've learnt so much. I might do a sneaky recap episode, but today is the last official episode. Next year we'll pick it back up for season 2. Got some exciting guests lined up and I'm keen to share them with you all. But for today, we've got Bec and Andrew. They are both exercise physiologists. Today we talk about a bit more health-related stuff. So we discuss, how to get into X-Phys and what's it all about. But mainly we go over how exercise can help and treat certain medical conditions. So we discuss depression, cardiovascular disease, cancer. We discuss stress as well, and just generally the impacts that exercise can have on your body, your mental health, and helping treat those diseases. So you'll learn a lot from today's episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. Have a great Christmas and a new year, and can't wait to share next year with you guys. All right, today we have a special episode. We have double guest, the first podcast threesome. Welcome, Bec. Welcome, Bec, Bailey, and Andrew.
Thank you.
Welcome. So,
Cheers.
2 exercise physiologists today, and we're going to run through, I guess, what X-Phys is, X-Phys knowledge, and some of their skill sets to help normal peoples. So we'll kick it off by, I think, let's define what X-physiology is, or exercise physiologists, what they do, or what it is.
Okay.
Because for sure, before I went to uni and stuff, I was like, oh, it's just the same as physio. Which I'm sure you probably cop a lot. I now know it's not.
It's different.
So let's maybe run through what it is, what you do.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to go first?
I'll start, yeah. So the way I define exercise physiology or exercise physiologists is we are health professionals who specialise in chronic disease management, and we prescribe exercise to help those patients, such as diabetes, arthritis, cancer, and even mental health like anxiety and depression. But that's why I describe it.
Yeah, I would say that we also assist with lifestyle management. So getting people to understand their behavior change, apply some sports psychology, which we do actually do in our degree to some extent, to sort of help people understand their mindset and shift from one way of thinking to another way of thinking to allow them to self-manage their conditions and to change their sort of perceptions around what they're doing in terms of their exercise or lack of exercise, as well as their food, opening them up to other concepts and other treatments such as psychology, dietitian, those sorts of things. And then basically, as Bec said, prescribing exercise to manage chronic conditions, pretty much any chronic condition that we can think of, really, apart from sort of some vestibular ones, which are out of our scope. That's more of a physio scope. And when we sort of define the difference between EP and physio, because you mentioned that, I like to think of it, particularly in Australia, physios tend to deal with the physical body as a structure and how it interacts, managing pain, and particularly more in that acute phase. They do work in some of those chronic conditions as well, so things like chronic pain or vestibular conditions, as I mentioned earlier, but also neurological conditions, helping with those, which we work alongside very closely. Physios can also diagnose, whereas exercise physiologists can't diagnose. That's outside our scope. And sort of physios work with that. EPs tend to look at the subcellular responses to exercise and how that helps with a chronic condition.
Yeah, so like
that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and then that's what I learned after learning. When would you say, do people pretty much always need a referral for EPs, or can I just go, I think I should see an EP?
Very dependent, I'd say. It depends on what funding scheme some people are going through. So if they're going through like Medicare or DVA, they absolutely need a referral. Some clinics like a referral just because it gives them more background from the GP of what's happened for this patient, because some patients tend to forget things or don't want to tell us things or disclose things, and that we really actually do need to know in order to safely prescribe exercise. And it is a prescription in the clinical sense of a prescription. But some people might want to go and see an EP, just private health. Absolutely don't need a referral for that for most clinics, I would say.
Yeah.
And then NDIS, I'm not too sure on. I haven't worked, but you have.
So NDIS will really go through like their plan manager or support coordinator. So as they're allocated a certain amount of funding, and if some goes to exercise physiology, then great, you'll get the client that way. There's also Work Cover Queensland as well. So like they will start at the GP. The GP will go to Work Cover, and then Work Cover will sort of go through their sources and find what's their best sort of sources to aid their patient. But yeah, I've worked with plenty of people who like come in with not a referral, and we just go through a full medical history, full fitness testing, but also just have people on Medicare and everything like that. And yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag at the end of the day.
Yeah. What would you say is, you might work with two different main sets of clients, but say for each of you, what would be the main type of clientele that you see?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, so I work for a charity that only sees veterans and their families. So the prevailing sort of people that I see come in with musculoskeletal conditions, mental health conditions. Most of my patients would have mental health conditions, either sort of underlying, sort of that are well managed or that are quite prevalent in their presentation. I have quite a few diabetics as well, and then some neurological and cardiovascular disease, but pretty much no oncology, no stroke rehab at the moment.
So I work at a private clinic, so we go across the board. We see everybody. My caseload at the moment is primarily neurological, so my special interests are Parkinson's, dementia, stroke, everything like that, and particularly FND, so functional neurological disorder. And on the other half of that, I also see hypermobile people, so all your contortionists and your bendy people out there. That's also a really big special interest of mine. So that's primarily my caseload, is the neurological / all the bendy people. So.
Yeah. And then all of our neurospicy cohort.
Yes.
So ASD, ADHD, AUDHD, PTSD, so our acquired neurodivergencies as well. Yeah.
What inspired, what made you want to be an ex-phys? And then obviously Andrew after.
So basically I was a personal trainer for 10 years and I loved it. I ran my own business, everything like that. And I wanted to help more people. And I always had a interest in medicine, in diseases, how they worked, how they affected the body, everything like that. I got to probably my 10th year as a PT, and I was like, you know what, I want to do something else, but I still want to be in the fitness industry. So I was literally flipping through the university book and I found an exercise physiology, and it seemed like my prayers had been answered and stuff like that. So more so luck of the draw, but also how I could help more people in a medical sense, I guess. But yeah, that was my inspiration for it.
For myself, so I started an engineering degree, got 2 years into that, and during those 2 years I got quite heavily into the gym, running and that sort of stuff again after sort of having quite a significant break. So my background was Defence Force, transitioned out and sort of struggled quite a lot with that transition. And going to the gym and whatnot, I noticed that my mental health was improving, physical health was improving. And then when I was doing engineering, I had the opportunity to do a minor in fitness and nutrition. And during that, I was chatting with one of the lecturers who's a dietitian and exercise scientist, I think she is, and sort of chatting away about, hey, I noticed this when I went to the gym. Is this a thing you can study, that mental health improves with exercise? She's like, oh yeah, that's exercise physiology. That's the whole field. I was like, cool. Well, I'm switching degrees next year. This is much better because me and math are not friends.
Yeah. It's just all engineering.
Yeah. Good at a mad time.
Should have picked that up before I started.
Yeah.
So obviously you need a degree, which is 4 years.
4 years.
And then do you need anything after that to work in the field? Do you have to get SR or any other stuff?
Yeah.
No. So once you've done your degree, you can get accredited through ESSA, which your first year I think is either half price or free. And then sort of from that, it's just ongoing professional development, which there's a huge option of stuff out there to do, which is really good. And generally you make it specific to sort of the field you're wanting to work in or the clients that you've got, and you need to know a little bit more about them. In terms of like further education, people can go on to do like PhDs. Some do masters in physio, so then they've got both of them. So if you do it that way around, then it's only 5.5 years of study for both, I think it is. So it's pretty good. And along with the EP degree, you also get an exercise science degree. So your first 3 years are exercise science, and in your final year, you do all your clinical physiology stuff.
So I can just go do one more year and be X-Fit.
Absolutely.
And
Fuck that, I'm done with uni.
you would go and do a master's of EP and then have a master's as well.
Yes.
And then start on a higher pay packet.
Outrank you first year.
Exactly.
I remember when I was doing uni, I was like, I'm going to do a master's at like whatever it was and then I was like, and then I'll do PhD because I want to be a lecturer. And as soon as I finished my degree, I was like, I'm not going back.
You get that. Yeah.
Done enough study.
But Andrew's right. Like you graduate, like you have the first 3 years exercise science and then exercise physiology. You can do your PhD, but you can also go into like diabetes education, dietetics, everything like that. So I'm actually starting that next year. So I'll be an ex-phys / diabetes educator.
Yeah, which is pretty cool to have both those.
Yeah,
it's good.
Is there a more common generic pathway for EPs? Like, would the generic sort of version be get your degree, go work in a clinic?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So most people do start in the clinic. I think you'll learn very quickly where you want to be in exercise physiology, either research or clinic or like wherever you want to go post that.
Workplace rehab is another one.
Workplace rehab is another one. It really depends like on the type of person you are, because you've got all the extroverts who are like clinic. And then all your introverts research. Or a bit of both, just throw yourself in the deep end and you'll find one.
That's it. And then there's also the pathway to do like rehab coordination. So sort of, getting in touch with patients who've had an injury at work or wherever it might be, and sort of coordinating their rehabilitation. Have you seen your EP? When's your next physio appointment? All that sort of stuff to try and get them back functioning as best they can as well. So that's another option. I know a lot of EPs will do clinical for a few years, and then after they sort of get a bit of empathy burnout, or they get sick of dealing with people every day, they'll switch over to the rehab coordination, because it's very much more of a desk-facing job. Lots of phone calls and paperwork and that sort of stuff. So, and then some people sort of flick between the two part-time.
Well, like you go into management, like clinical lead.
Yeah, clinic lead, management, stuff
like that.
What's the most rewarding part of your job?
Yeah, good question.
Every job has shit days, but like for PT, in the gym and stuff, you'd know from being a PT, it's like such and such comes to you and there's a wedding or a birthday or something, and then they get that goal and you see how happy they are and you're like, I helped you get to X. Is it similar thing? Yeah,
like particularly for my patients, all the neurological ones like Parkinson's, anything where that's sort of like, or MS as well, where they're quite limited by the condition. I always try to say that like, you're not limited by your condition, you're limited by yourself. And so basically allowing them the ability to move and letting them see that they're actually like not bound by whatever they may have is actually really rewarding. And like probably one of the main reasons why I do it is to make people believe that like you're not bound. So just like making them believe more on themselves is probably the most rewarding part.
Yeah, I think especially when you're working with chronic conditions where, things like MS and Parkinson's and some stages of cancer are, there is not a lot that can be done to stop it. It is, it is that sort of end stage based kind of condition. It's more about keeping them functioning and seeing, okay, this person's, been able to, maintain staying independent for a period of time. For some of our other conditions, like our hypertension clients, so high blood pressure, or our diabetic clients, sometimes the goal is to help them to reduce their medications. So I've had clients who have been able to reduce medication levels quite significantly, which is really good. Even had some come off certain medications because they no longer need it because of their good response to exercise. And then things like our chronic pain patients and, sarcopenic patients who've been quite limited in what they can do, having them come in and be like, I was able to, walk to the shops and back the other day, or I was able to squat down for the first time. I remember I had a patient who was unable to like squat or anything, could barely get up from a chair, took something like 20-something seconds to do 5 sit-to-stands, was able to get them to squat. And when they squatted, they were crying in the clinic because they were just so happy. For the first time in literally years, they could squat down, tie their shoes and get back up.
Yeah. Sometimes we think that's not a big deal because we just do it all the time. And then when you hurt your back or something, you go, oh, I hate not moving. It's like, that's what they've done the whole time.
Exactly. And sometimes I've been living like this for years.
Yeah. Would you say ex-phys is, say like physio is more like rehabilitation? We're generalizing here.
Yeah.
And then ex-phys is more like not necessarily rehab. It's like, because you guys sometimes clients with like chronic diseases, it's more about like management as opposed to rehabilitation.
Agreed.
100%.
And then maybe trying to improve that management. All that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of giving them the courage to do it themselves. Like with our cardiovascular patients, someone might have had an MI, myocardial infarction or a heart attack, or cardiac arrest, and then they're scared about going back to exercise or doing too much, and it's sort of about giving them the confidence that no, you can do this, but it's about understanding when your symptoms start to show and how to respond when they do show, so that you can safely continue doing exercise or just general life as well.
I think like a basic understanding or like educating our patients on pain education as well. I think a lot of people, like when they're in pain, they're like, I'm not going to move, I'm not going to do anything, I'm super scared. Or
you get taught pain is bad.
Yeah, we get taught.
It's a good thing to teach, I guess.
It's a good thing to teach.
To start with.
To start. But pain is a defense mechanism.
It's the body's best guess warning system.
That's
and you can make it go wrong very easily.
Absolutely.
You can trick people into feeling pain when they're not actually feeling pain. And there's an interesting thing on SBS at the moment from Osher Gunsberg, A World of Pain. I haven't yet had a chance to watch it, but it's all about chronic pain and dealing with chronic pain and what pain actually is neurologically and how we can sort of adapt our bodies and our thought processes around it to lead a more wholesome life, even when we have pain. Yeah.
There is like a particular group called the Noi Group, and they're experts in pain. They've published so many books. Like Explain Pain is their normal one. It's a great book. Yeah, there's one for general public and there's the clinician version as well. And it goes into the deep neuroscience and pathophysiology of pain, and it really opens up your eyes on the perspective on how pain works. Why is it there? Why is it cool. Yeah.
Some great TED Talks on it too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So I kind of want to go over a few fields, I don't know what you'd call it, areas, diseases, not diseases, but fields is probably the best word. And maybe give people listening like some tips in regards to that. Obviously each person is different and they have their own case, like all that sort of stuff, but generalizing and stuff like that. So the first one I want to touch on is like stress management and muscle tension, which everybody everybody's stressed. It's 2024.
Don't watch the news.
What would be some, let's talk Gen Pop here, just everyday, no underlying conditions and stuff like that, just everyday Joe. What does stress look like in the physical form?
So stress in its physical form can be thousands of things. It can be like excess sweating. It can be like anxiety. It can be talking really, really fast. Like stress represents differently in different people as well. So I think the more that you know your client and the more they respond to different stress mechanisms, the more that you can pick it out. So there wouldn't be something we're looking for specifically unless we knew them quite well. Other than that, it'd be more so like if we're reading their medical history, they've got anxiety, depression, then yes. But with healthy populations, it's more about getting to know the person and then seeing how they respond appropriately.
I would say that blood pressure is a real big indicator. I remember I was in a stress meeting at one point. My blood pressure usually sits at about 105 on 60, which is relatively low, but for a tall, fit person, that's fine. And it spiked to about 168 on 90 something. I couldn't replicate that in the gym. No matter what I did, could not do it. Even with Tabata training, literally falling off the rower, exhausted, could not replicate it. So it just shows what stress can do to us physiologically. But also, interestingly, some people are highly stressed but have absolutely no response because they're so psychologically used to being in such a high stress state that they no longer actually show the signs. And these are the sort of people, the sort of things I listen for are things like, oh, I just seem to go from, 0 to 100, and I just snap like that. And it's like, that's because you're not at 0. You're at 93.
Yeah.
You've only got 7%. You haven't registered that you're at 93 because you're so used to the feeling and the sensation. A lot of it is, as you mentioned, that muscle stiffness. And quite often these patients also present with chronic pain. Usually it's lower back pain or shoulder pain. It's like, well, where do we hold our tension? In our neck or in our back because we're quite stiff and tight. And it's about getting them to recognize those signs as well. But as Bec mentioned, that everyone presents differently. People have the fight, flight, freeze or flop response. So it could be any one of those.
What I know for me, whenever I go to physio or whatever, the first, because I always go like, oh, my traps are tight. And first question is like, how's work going? I'm like, like, are you stressed? I'm like, I don't know. And like, it feels like you're stressed.
I'll go to
Is that, Is that from, like, what's the mechanism behind that? Like, why does my neck get tight as fuck when I'm stressed? Is it cortisol stuff?
So it can be cortisol, but as Andrew mentioned before, like when we are stressed as humans or like when we have a desk job or something like that, our tension will sit in our neck and our shoulders. It's just the first place the stress seems to accumulate because it's easy to all hunch up and get really, really tight. And same with our lower back as well. We would say like sitting is like relaxing and it helps us focus more. And then they say today, sitting is the new smoking. And that's where that sort of tension builds up in that lower back because it needs to move, it needs to support you, it needs to do a whole bunch of other things. But if you're just sitting there and your mind's going a million miles a minute, that stress is going to accumulate in the lumbar spine as well.
Mm. One of the things as well that happens is when we think about what a natural stress response is, we're looking at that increase in cortisol, increase in adrenaline, which then brings a bit of tension and stiffness into the muscles naturally so that we can move a bit faster. Because if we're loose and floppy and have low tone, we can't move and respond as quickly. But being in our societal evolution has gone way outpaced our evolution as humans. So we're in this highly stressed environment naturally in a day-to-day, but we haven't physiologically kept up with it. So really what people should be doing is retraining themselves to downregulate their system, and how to relax is so important to teach people. And that's one of the things that I do a lot with my patients, because the mental health side, and sort of getting them to, do their deep breathing, go on nature walks, do Shinrin-yoku or nature bathing, these sorts of things. And it helps them to recognize when they've got that tension and respond and teach them how to relax. Sort of like if we've had a female's gone and had some sort of pelvic operation, so hysterectomy, or even had pregnancy and given birth, they will often get sent to a pelvic floor physio specialist to have an examination to see what the tension is like in the pelvic floor. And sometimes it's too tight. So they have to teach them to relax and allow the pelvic floor to relax. Similar sort of thing, we try and teach them to relax with their whole body because it's too tense.
And on the tail end of that, you can also go a bit more deep into people who have gone through sexual assault and everything like that, like the whole emotional side of things.
And then we have that psych-based side of it as well, which presents physically.
I've had patients where like they've had a significant amount of trauma and I've had to keep the door open the entire time because they have that flight sort of like emotion to go. They need to go, stuff like that. So it can stretch deeper, much deeper, and present differently that way as well. And as a clinician, you have to be sort of more flexible in your prescription and how does it best serve your client.
Yeah, even where you do your assessments and stuff as well.
100%. Yeah.
Would you say the excessive tightness, like the lower back, the neck, maybe not the pelvic floor, but let's say those two for now, is from that accumulation of what you were saying, the fight or flight, the cortisol, the muscle tightens.
Yeah.
But then you're not using that tightened muscle.
Yeah.
So then the accumulation is like what causes the pain.
There.
Exactly. Yeah. You're getting those muscular adhesions. If something's tight and it stays tightened and shortened, so if the muscle stays shortened for a while, then it's going to be less flexible and pliable. And it is about mobility is one of the biggest things that I encourage all my patients to do, all my friends to do. But it's also looking at like flexibility as well. But then, getting on that retraining of the system and understanding, okay, I'm tense here, I need to relax. And sort of those little 5-minute check-ins, getting people to set an alarm at their desk, every hour on the hour, tense every muscle, and then relax that, sort of contract, relax, getting used to that as well.
It's like that meme when it's like, dude, drop your shoulders, lower your jaw. Like, it's like this.
What is this?
And that's the thing as well. We think that we're relaxing. We go home and we think that we're relaxing, but we're staring at a screen or we're on our phone, doom scrolling or looking at stuff that is getting that response. It's not relaxing because we're not actively relaxing. It's dissociating from what's going on, but we're still tense.
It's
and
not
tight.
working anymore.
Exactly.
You're on autopilot.
So there's like, we can go and intentionally relax, or we can go home and dissociate, and most people just do that.
Yeah.
Because it's easier.
Brain off now.
Yeah,
Brain off now.
Keeping it Gen Poppy, because obviously it is too hard to do without. You sort of touched on some before. What would be some things you'd recommend just for your average person who is like stressed to the nines, just to implement? Like you said, go outside, go for a walk, get some sunshine. Obvious ones, but sometimes people forget to do that. What are some other ones?
I'd say definitely like for meditation. So like you can do the 5-minute videos on YouTube, everything like that. Like it may seem silly at first, particularly if you haven't like exposed yourself to it. But meditation, but also like giving yourself a break and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and saying like, I'm human, I'm allowed to have these moments of stressful situations, and giving yourself credit where due credit is due. Because basically if we can't forgive ourselves, we can't sort of de-stress, then like, you're just going to keep piling up and up and up, and eventually,
Tacos still fall apart, but we still love them.
Yes.
Soft tacos.
Yeah, exactly.
Soft tacos.
Soft tacos. It's about taking the moments that you have as well to do brief check-ins. So one of the things that I love to do is when I'm driving, every time I come to a red light, just check in. How's my shoulders? Oh, they're a bit tense. Drop them. And do that sort of stuff. It also helps people to stay off their phones while they drive, which pet hate of mine as a former driving instructor. But like taking those small moments to like check in with yourself and go, oh, where are my shoulders? Oh, they're up. I'm just relaxing. And the more that we can sort of get that, oh, I'm a bit tense here, intentionally relax, that intentional relaxation helps the brain to switch itself off from that continued tense, because it is a motor program initially.
Right, so you're kind of reminding it like, bro, we're not stressed here.
Bro, we're not stressed. We're just sitting at the light waiting for it to turn green. There's no point like getting stressed if we're stuck at the lights, because there's nothing we can do about it. Sort of the nihilist view of the world, I guess, but so sunny nihilist.
Like the psychology behind that is just like only focus on things that you can control. You can't control traffic lights.
Exactly.
So, chill.
And then in terms of the nature bathing, it's come out of Japan. I think they've been prescribing it for nearly 30, 25 years, something like that. And the concept, which actually has a lot of research behind it, is that you go into a natural environment where you can't see or interact or hear built environment. So going for a hike, like way up in the mountains somewhere, perfect. And we can see that within 10 minutes, I think one of the studies showed, we can see cortisol levels drop, we can see adrenaline levels drop. And the respondents also like report feeling more relaxed as well, being in that environment. And it only takes 10 minutes. There are places around the city, we're in Brisbane, so there's places like Whites Hill where you can go where you can't see or interact or hear anything that's built environment. There's koalas, there's trees, all that sort of stuff. But it's also about being present and using that mindful movement as well. So being mindful, going up and touching the different trees and the leaves and being mindful of, okay, this is what this texture feels like. This is what this sound is like. Noticing the different hums between all the cicadas or the birds. We're coming into summer now, so we're going to have all of that going on. And it sort of helps to switch the brain from that default mode of panic over to the complex executive network, which really is our focused mode.
So you ditch the podcast, ditch the audio, no headphones, just raw dog it in nature. Go
in there. No shoes.
Just immerse yourself.
I definitely noticed I don't know what the science behind this is. Like sometimes I go to dog park, I'm like, no, I'll take my Birks off and get my feet in the grass. And
that's it.
it's something weirdly
Satisfying.
Yeah, calming, satisfying, whatever about it.
Yeah.
What about, do you guys know much about like ice bars and like the breathing, breath work and stuff?
I'll let Andrew take this one.
So ice bars contraindicated after strength training because it inhibits the adaptations. But in terms of that, I think it's about having that thing to focus on. I haven't done a lot of like look into the research, but from what I understand about the way the brain works is it'll switch us out of that default mode, which is really that background rumination, just the thoughts that are going on, into that focused mode of, we've got something intense going on that I really need to focus on. And to stop myself from freaking out, I have to really focus on my breath, which is a really complex thing to do when you're in that high stress environment that's happening with the ice. I'm sure there's some physiological things that are happening from that temperature as well. Anything under 10 degrees, I know there is release of like endorphins and that sort of stuff as well, which is good. Anyone who's been in a sauna and jumped in a cold pool straight after, you get that rush, that really quick high. Those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, because ice bars I've noticed, I don't do it every morning, but I do it occasionally. Whether like the science is accurate, because you read different things, it does make you kind of feel good after anyway. So I'm like, well, if it makes me feel good, whatever. And then the people that do it every day, like they get up, they do it, and then they go to work after. It's almost kind of like you're saying. It's like, well, now it's a routine of like getting out of the mundane, wake up, shower, coffee, switch
it
the brain
becomes a
on.
ritual.
Something, and you got to like, it's hard, it's shit, it's cold and dark, and you got to get in this ice bath, but then it's making you do something like out of the norm. And
exactly.
It's the same thing for like people going swimming in the ocean really early in the morning.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, same vibe.
Same vibe. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's cold. It's middle of winter at 6 a.m. It's not a fun time at the beach.
Added element of our marine life.
And I'm sure there's some level of like adaptation from the HP axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis to down-regulate those signals as well. We see the same with particularly people who have PTSD with exercise, particularly that high-intensity exercise can down-regulate those signals because it gets the body used to having those signals, but in a safe environment as well.
Yeah. Veterans are pretty prone to that.
Oh, absolutely, yes. A lot of us have PTSD.
With exercise and, because a lot of people are super stressed, they'll go for a run and clears their head and all that sort of jazz. What is the physiological response after you, doesn't matter what kind of training, run, fit stop, weights, whatever. What is it during or after that when you finish and you get home, you're like, oh, I'm more relaxed? Is it because you're just physically tired, or is it because of the endorphins, or like what's...
It's definitely due to the endorphins and the hormones that you get, that you produce through exercise as well. We've known for a really long time that exercise is a stress reliever and increases dopamine and lowers the cortisol levels, everything like that. You can look at it in multiple ways. If I can say one thing here, if you're looking at females with menopause, cortisone and exercise does not go hand in hand for them, and it'd be different sort of goals and aspirations from there as well. So depending on the patient and what their goals are, exercise will respond differently to them. And whether it's stress relieving or not, you'd have to sort of work around that.
Each person. Yeah,
everyone's going to be different. There are some people who have a stress response to exercise. So I've had worked with people who have panic attacks from exercise. But that's because of the physiological response they get. The increased heart rate, increased sweating also happens when you get a panic attack. So they have those responses, then they have a panic attack because they think that they're having a panic attack. That makes sense.
The associated trauma is like sitting there and it's trying to replace
and it's
trying
about,
to replicate.
And for those people, it's about getting them used to that. And literally was one person I worked on was 10 seconds of very hard exercise, lie down for 5 minutes. And then reduce the rest, increase the exercise, and very slowly build those back together. And it helped sort of get them used to that. But in terms of like general pop there, we have our happy neurotransmitters. So we've got things like dopamine, serotonin, or adrenaline, these sorts of things. that can boost our mood, can also settle us down. Serotonin is also a painkiller as well. And then the way that they'll be released is different depending on the mode of exercise we're doing as well. So there's some studies that show that dopamine and noradrenaline are more in that sort of high intensity level, those sort of beta endorphins, those beta endorphins in more of that long term, like long distance stuff. And then the serotonin from resistance training, those sorts of things. But we have a release of all of them with any form of exercise. It just depends on what you're looking for for those. But it also helps with, down regulating that HPA axis, I mean. So when you have less adrenaline, you have less cortisol. Those sorts of good flows on.
I think like a good analogy for that is if we're going to look at the chemical compounds, particularly of dopamine. Dopamine is a massive chemical compound. Like, it's huge when you look at it underneath a microscope. Your body needs a lot of energy to push that dopamine up as well. So you're dealing with patients who have anxiety and depression, or people who are going through a stressful scenario, their dopamine levels are going to be that much lower and harder to bring back up to a normal state of equilibrium as well. So
people with depression show reduced levels of dopaminergic cells, so the cells that produce dopamine. Similar in Parkinson's, but slightly different pathology that's happening there. But we know that exercise, particularly for mild to moderate depression, can help restore those cells, so you can actually get more of those cells, regrow them, and level out those dopamine
restore
levels.
The
body. And then we also have adaptations in terms of, like, with yoga, that sort of stuff. We also have the release of GABA, which is a anxiolytic, and is actually, there's a synthetic form of GABA is the main ingredient in our anxiolytic medications. And so when we have an increase in GABA, we have a decrease in anxiety, which is why a lot of people go for things like yoga and mindfulness, because it is actually released in quite substantial amount when we do those exercises. Cool.
All right, so touching on depression is probably a good segue there. How does exercise help, I don't want to say cure, but treat or aid in depression?
So as we mentioned, there's improvements in levels of dopamine within the body. We increase the levels of dopaminergic cells, so the cells that are producing dopamine. There's also that, I think, improved response to dopamine as well. So it can sit in the into what's it called? The junction, my brain. It can. So the dopamine will sit in the synaptic junction a little bit longer to allow for that positive effect to occur. But we also see things like when we're exercising, we're more likely to get out of our own head because we're out somewhere, tend to be doing exercise. So we'll be at a park, we'll be at the gym, there might be other people around, we might decide to exercise with friends or with other people. So exercise can help in terms of that social assistance as well. And humans are social creatures. All of us have a limit to which we can tolerate other humans, which is fair. Particularly our introverts more than others, but we are social creatures, so we need to be around other people. It's not just as some people do; everyone does.
To an extent.
To an extent.
All the ADHDs out there. To an extent.
And it's like we also see changes in the brain as well. So when we exercise, we have a linear response in terms of neuroplasticity enabled. So brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, is released when we exercise. Any type of exercise, doesn't matter what we're doing. And that increases the brain's ability to change its structure. So it increases, how quickly we can develop new synaptic pathways and reinforce the ones that are there. So a lot of what we do in my clinic, at least with my patients who do have depression, is we'll exercise them and then we'll try and get them in with their psychologist as soon as we can afterwards to get that to use the advantage of, okay, the brain is now in a more plastic state to actually change, go and do the talk therapy that will help with that changing. Or if they've already got, exercises to do from their psychologist, I'll encourage them to do them as soon as they finish the session. Go and do your worksheets, go and do whatever it is, your values, your cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever you're doing. And we see changes through that, and we can use that. In fact, the Black Dog Institute down in Sydney is now doing psychotherapy whilst on exercise bikes, just pedaling, because that effect is so acute. I think it's 10 to 15 minutes is that effect. So after that, it comes back to that more baseline level from what I've read. So it's really about get on it while we can, which is where I really love sort of the clinic that I'm in. At least we do have that quite close knit in terms of that interdisciplinary response and treatment, which is good. And some of them, there are different levels of depression as well. So mild to moderate, there's a lot of evidence to show that exercise can have just as good effect in terms of reducing the symptoms as medications can. But in terms of severe depression, major depressive disorder, the exercise is not as effective, looking at some of the research. But it's important to know that in treating the condition of depression or anxiety or PTSD, whatever it is, the exercise is being used to manage the symptoms that the medications would. The person still needs to go and do their talk therapy around that, because generally when we have mental health conditions, there's also some level of maladaptation in terms of our thinking and thought patterns, and we want to address both, because if we don't address the thought patterns, doesn't matter how many feel-good chemicals we pump into our body, we're always going to be stuck in that little loop there. Yeah.
And just off the tail end of that, like statistically, exercise is 15% better than all psychiatric mental health drugs. So for people to be on mental health drugs, it's like, well, yes, you can be on that. If that helps you in any way, shape or form, great. But exercise will be doing that at a much better rate. Safe and effectively. But if we want to look at depression with people with chronic diseases like FND, PTSD, everything like that, like those types of episodes or flare-ups, we like to call them, will be responded based on their condition. So if I take FND as an example, it's a trauma-based condition. So whatever trauma happened in their life which started that depression, or just that body is constantly reliving that trauma that happened, and therefore the body will respond accordingly to how the brain thinks is the correct way to respond. So
the way to keep us safe.
The way to keep it safe, So like schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, everything like that, the body is finding a way to keep itself safe from endangering itself. Similar to how it tells us it's in pain, this is the mental side of it.
It's a good way to think about.
I think like an interesting one, if you want to bring it back to like Everyday People, is the movie Split. How the guy has multiple, great movie. He made the personalities to keep himself safe from his parents. So,
those adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs,
childhood trauma.
Prominent.
Do you think, PTSD, do you think, obviously in those cases, like the quite severe ones, medication's almost necessary to
absolutely
keep the person safe?
Yes.
But do you think on the other end, where it's sort of situational depression or, the lighter versions, I don't know what the term is.
Mild to moderate,
In today's world, we're a bit too willy-nilly with handing out meds as opposed to prescribing exercise, and a lot of that would be...
So I think, and I think Andrew will heavily agree with me on this, like GPs are handing out mental health medications left, right and centre, same with psychiatrists. I think psychiatrists will have a better understanding, but I do believe that mental health medications handed out just to sort of solve a problem, and particularly if it's an older GP, I find they're not exactly willing to dive themselves into exercise physiology, whereas the newer GPs are more evolved with that, and they're like, get your nutrition right, let's go see a dietitian, get your exercise right, go see an exercise physiologist. So really situational.
A sleep coach as well. When we think about the pillars of health, we have physical health, mental health, we have sleep, rest and nutrition, the 5 pillars, and it's like if we're not hitting each one of those well, then you can think of it as holding up like a table, and that table is going to start to lean off to one side. And if we've got, 3 or 4, and all of those pillars all interact well. So if we've got bad sleep, our stress is going to be higher because we've got high levels of cortisol. So we're less likely to make good food choices. And if we're less likely to make good food choices, we're going to feel guilty about going to the gym. And if we don't go to the gym because we're like, oh, what are people going to think because I ate shit food on the weekend? Then it's that little circle that keeps spiraling us down. I think the use of medication is important in particularly those extreme levels, particularly that severe depression level. But medication is something to help level someone out while they do the rest of the work to try and deal with what is underlying the cause of that. So the medications essentially are stabilizing, but also to some degree, without saying they're a Band-Aid solution, they provide a Band-Aid to stop the bleeding. Yeah. In inverted commas,
I know what you mean.
While the person gets proper, addressing the issue. Some people and some conditions do permanently need medications.
Oh, for sure.
So like our schizophrenia, psychoaffective disorders, bipolar, these sorts of things. There's evidence to show that exercise and medications, and diet and whatnot can help in terms of leveling and managing, but there's always going to be that bit of a flux.
Yeah.
But with our mild to moderate depression and our anxiety and our PTSD, once people are able to deal with the underlying cause, generally we see the symptoms of the condition go away to an extent that you could call it an equivalent of remission, as you would in, say, cancer or diabetes, because the symptoms are no longer prevalent. They might rear their head again in the future. If things happen, then they make us more prone to those same sorts of things. But in terms of the medications from GPs, I think GPs, they do a really good job. They're overworked because we don't have enough of them. But in terms of handing out the medications, I think going for those more holistic supports first, like, go see a sleep coach, dietitian, EP, even massage. There's so much evidence to show that massage can be used to reduce stress levels permanently. In the US, they use it for PTSD, and it's called touch therapy, and it helps people to relax. But over here, we don't. It's not on the. You can't get a referral. It's not covered by.
We wish it was.
DVA
Can't use your
is
high
not
caps
covered
for
by.
massage.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
Which is annoying. Yeah.
Is there's obviously not one size fits all, but say someone who is on that sort of edge and they've gone to the doc and maybe the doc's like, oh, you're not quite ready for medication yet, or they're doing medication to begin with as the Band-Aid and then you want to start all the other processes. Mm-hmm. Is any kind of exercise good enough, or is there certain types that might be better to help manage that?
Definitely certain types, depending on what the condition is. So if it's an anxiety-based condition, doing high-intensity exercise is probably not going to help in the short term, because it's also how they present on the day. If they already come in and they're already stressed and they're already anxious and they're already quite heightened, we need to down-regulate them, bring them back down. And you want to get them used to intentionally relaxing the system. There is evidence to show that doing those higher intensity sessions in some anxiety and trauma-based disorders can help to downregulate the HPA axis. But in terms of that, it's more looking at, okay, let's manage those symptoms in that moment with the exercise and help us relax, and trying to get those GABA pathways going as well. So things like yoga, Tai Chi, mindful movement, to bring them back into the now rather than being off somewhere else. For things like depression, it is more that, okay, let's get you up and moving. Let's upregulate you because you're down. Your system is quite down in the dumps. It's down quite slow. We need to wake you up, get your dopamine flowing, get your adrenaline flowing, these sorts of things to get them up. And then we have some conditions like bipolar where they'll flick between the two. Yeah. So it's really balancing on
it's
that
a fun
fine.
time.
Which is fun.
So you think for your like traditional sort of depression, any sort of exercise, any upbeat, like running, walking, any sort of, it's just get moving, get doing that. And then obviously on the highly strung side, you want to do the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Bring it back down.
You want to sort of you want to do the opposite of how the client's presenting.
Yeah, you want to look at their physiology and go, okay, well, you're anxious, which means your heart rate's high, your blood pressure's high, all these things. Okay, let's bring that down. Let's do some relaxation stuff.
Yeah, let's not do
exactly.
Let's go do Pilates.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Still going to bed. But.
I can tell you now, Pilates sometimes is an upregulation.
But you get more stressed out because you can't do something.
Yeah, my legs were shaking this morning, so which is good.
Do you guys have any hacks for, because when you are in the middle, like I've had depression before, and when you're in the middle of, let's call it an episode or whatever, where you're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, all that sort of shit.
Yep.
Even though you know exercise is good for you,
Yep.
but you're like, I don't want to go do it, I'd rather just sit here and ride or whatever.
Yep.
Is there tactics that you found are successful to like get the person to try and get in that routine?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can start with this one. So the most common one I use is the 3-2-1 method. It's basically you count down from 3, you get to 1, and you straight in. Like basically, doesn't matter what's happening around you. You're getting up out of bed. You're gonna go have that shower. You're gonna go make that bed. So there's like the initial exposure therapy. There's also like the fight, like for the more anxiety-induced attacks. There's the 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, etc., etc. And also the butterfly on the heart, trying to match your heartbeat, stuff like that. I find that's helped in terms of patients who have come in and are already quite stressed. But yeah, in those instances, I find, particularly for the neurospicy crew, the ones where you have to do something straight away, like you're making that competitive nature, appealing to that better side of them, where they like that sort of gamify things, that works most of the time, I find. But purely client situational.
Yeah. So sorry, are those things more for like the more anxiety vibe?
No, they're both. Yeah. So if you're stuck on the couch, you're feeling like you don't want to do anything, you don't want to go have a shower, you don't have to go make the bed, you don't want to get out of the room, anything like that. I find that counting 3, 2, 1, and once you hit 1, doesn't matter what you're feeling, doesn't matter what you're thinking.
You just got to get up.
Get up, yeah. And you find that sort of process that your brain hates to be told what to do, and it hates being told no. If you give it the option to have no other option, it's going to get up. Yeah. But it can backfire.
Yeah.
I think I take a much more self-gentle, softer approach to it.
Different horses, different courses.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Because for a lot of my patients, they've been told what to do for their entire career or for a lot of them their entire life, and it's like, okay, they also don't have that ability for self-compassion, because in defense, it's very much about everything is for the mission for other people, versus you do nothing for yourself, because it's seen as selfish in inverted commas. Whereas I get them to have a lot of self-compassion for themselves. So if they wake up and they're like, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to go to the gym, I just want to lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and doom scroll and whatnot. It's like, okay, let's do at least one step. Take one step to getting out of bed. That step could be throwing off the covers. Okay, cool, you've thrown off the covers. How do you feel? Are you happy to swing your legs off the side of the bed? Yep, cool, let's do that. Okay, now stand up. And if you stand up and you go, nah, I'm out. Cool, go back to bed. You at least took 3 steps. Mm-hmm. And those 3 steps are 3 steps that you wouldn't have taken if you'd just given up at the first hurdle. Yeah. And so a lot of it's about having that self-compassion to say, yeah, sometimes I feel absolutely terrible and I don't want to do stuff, but I can still take 1 to 2 steps and really focus on the positive of taking those steps, Then there's also things like, that quick activation for the adrenal system to get us out, up and moving. So, because we're quite down-regulated in those scenarios. One of the things I get with some of my patients to do is literally just clap really hard for 5 seconds, as fast as they can, and it builds energy in the system. Once you've built that little bit of energy, it just keeps going. It's like, okay, cool, do it for another 5 seconds. Cool, now let's do a couple of half squats. Cool, let's jog up and down the room. And you slowly build that energy on top of each other. Anyone who's gone to the gym when they're feeling a bit slightly tired will say by the time they finish their session, they had so much more energy. Yep. Exactly the same. You've built that energy in the system. You're just starting from a very low point.
Yeah. That's what I found. It's like once you're up, you're you're not happy as Larry, but like, I'm moving. Oh, I'm already up. I might as well do this. I might as well do this. But like that first getting up, that's the hard bit where you're like, well, I could just do the next TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
The hardest part is starting. For a lot of people.
Yeah. There's obviously different levels to all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's it. Once that momentum's built, it's built.
Yeah, it started. Yeah.
Is there any hot tips? Because obviously we are social creatures.
Yeah.
Sometimes the social component creates accountability as
Absolutely.
well. Like, I'm supposed to meet everyone to kick the ball around. Have you found anything in that world that has helped?
Yeah, getting people to have like a gym buddy. So, if someone is quite depressed or whatnot, and they find it difficult to build their own motivation to go and do something outside or go to the gym or whatever it might be, having someone to go with is good, because then that person can ring you up and go, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You be ready in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or I'm, knocking down the door. And so you've got that impetus to get up and go and do things. For some people, again, coming back to addressing the underlying causes, for some people, they can do all of their exercise for other people, but never for themselves. And so for these people, it's about getting them to start doing things for themselves, even if it's something small. Like when you wake up in the morning, don't just make a little Nescafe coffee from Blend 43 or whatever it is. Go and walk down the shop, spend an extra $5 on yourself and get a proper coffee.
Yeah.
Building those small things. Cool. Okay. Let's go for a walk by ourselves, for ourselves, and getting them understanding that we don't have to do things for everyone else all the time. We can do stuff for ourselves.
Yeah. Pathways of self-care.
Yeah, that's it. So once again, it's very much that individualized approach on that. Yeah.
And do you find, obviously we all know that continual exercise is a good, I forgot the word here, it helps prevent depression.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there sort of, in your experience, a minimum amount that you think is ideal, say, per week? Like 1 or 2 a week is enough to sort of combat that? Or do you think 3 or 4 is the better? Like, situational depending, but generally speaking.
Yeah. I think particularly with my patients, ones that absolutely hate exercise or they never did it growing up, it was never a thing, which is super common. But I always say, look, I just want you to do this home exercise program once per week for the next 4 weeks. And then we build that up. So the next month, 2 times, next month, 3 times per week. And it's about building that up, but also making sure it's enjoyable for them, because you just can't throw someone straight into the deep end and expect them to like it. They can really hate it.
And enjoyment is so important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's we cannot stress enough, find the Pilates, find the Fit Stop, find the F45, find the things that you enjoy. Otherwise, if someone's going to force it down your throat, you're not going to do it. You're not going to maintain. So
if it's like shooting basketball with your friends,
still that's it.
Sunshine, movement, heart rate.
That's
exactly.
Walking the dog or going for your hot girl walks on Newstead River Walk.
Yeah, I'm going after this.
Yeah, whatever it is. Trying to incorporate that.
Yeah, exactly. And the movement that you enjoy doing is the movement that you will do.
Yes, that's it, 100%.
Anything is better than nothing. But when we look at prescription of exercise for certain conditions, the research in terms of how much is the best and that sort of stuff for mental health conditions isn't quite as strong for things like cardiovascular disease or diabetes. But it's still if we look at, I think it's 30 minutes twice a day for 30 minutes twice a day, 3 times a week for anxiety conditions, for things like depression. I think it's a minimum of 30 per day across the week, and that can look like anything. So it can look like going for a walk, cool. It can look like going for a bouldering, going for as we have all said, the suggestions. Even things like dancing or kayaking. Think outside of the square of what movement generally needs to look like, because any movement is good. And I think that's the key thing. Anything is better than nothing. If you do 10 minutes in a day, that's better than no minutes in a day.
Building up the habit as well. So I've heard of plenty of stories where people just go to the gym, they'll do 5 minutes on leg extension and they'll go home. And it's about building that routine that they're coming back every day for that 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes will turn to 10, 15, 20. Yeah. It's just building that habitual routine.
Yeah.
All right, so moving into cardiovascular disease. and or / prevention of cardiovascular disease. How does exercise impact that or help prevent that?
Yeah. So cardiovascular disease also being like one disease that kills people in Australia, unfortunately. Exercise can help sort of maintain the flow of the heart. It can help increase endorphins and hormones around like the function of the heart as well. But it's also more about creating that flow, like lowering blood pressure or like increasing it to like a normal state as well. That maintaining the functional independence the heart has for the body. And cardiovascular disease has a lot of comorbidities as well. So like whether that be smoking or whether that be like type 2 diabetes as well. There's always going to be something lurking underneath that's caused cardiovascular disease as well. So getting back to the whole lifestyle changes and like making better choices for yourself. So that particular like chronic heart failure or cardiovascular disease doesn't really sink into your life and call it end.
And when we look at cardiovascular disease as well, it's important to include like our dietitians as well. Because when we look at, okay, you know, there's atherosclerosis there and that sort of stuff, and we're starting to get calcium build up, you know, we need to look at, okay, what sort of stuff are we putting into our body? You know, we start looking at our bloods. It's important to know as well that everyone has their own metabolic profile as well. So for myself, for example, my genetics tend to sit me a little bit higher for like cholesterol, but there's no attachment to the heart, so that sort of stuff. So, you know, slightly higher cholesterol, but no side effects or symptoms from it, which is normal for different people because we are all, you know, multicultural society. We're from all over the planet, so we've all got different metabolic profiles behind that. We also see, you know, hypertrophy of certain areas of the heart to help with pumping. When we look at athletes, tend to have those more effective hearts to pump. After we've had a myocardial infarct or we're starting to get that heart failure, we can also get the same level of hypertrophy, but we see a smaller volume in the chambers as well. So you can think, to oversimplify it, in things like heart failure, the muscle comes inwards on the ventricle, versus when we're an athlete, it grows outwards, if that makes sense, you know, to massively oversimplify it.
In rare scenarios, if the heart's too big, that can also cause complications. So you can be an athlete and be in a hypertrophy state with your heart and therefore causing myocardial infarctions.
Yep. But we also see changes peripherally. So when we do exercise, we get that elastic change that happens in our blood vessels, or all levels of our blood vessels. And the more, particularly cardiovascular exercise that we do, the more pliable the body becomes, so the quicker we're able to respond in terms of our blood pressure, which is really important. We also see changes in that, again, subcellular level in terms of efficiency of oxygen use. So someone who's got really inefficient oxygen use, their heart will need to work faster because they need to get more air in, means more blood pumping to different areas, which means higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, faster everything that's going on, versus someone who's more effective at using their oxygen. So they won't need to have a higher heart rate because their body will go, okay, well, I can see there's more oxygen in the blood, I can just keep using it. These sorts of things as well.
Yeah, so like the mechanics of the heart and how it's responded to the body that it's in, and how that body responds to stress or exercise or eating like differently, or like environmental stresses as well.
Yeah. Then, you know, our medications as well.
Yep.
When it comes to medication, there's a lot that happens around the body to regulate blood pressure. You know, our kidneys are involved, adrenal system, our renal system. It's all involved. So the medications can affect a lot of different portions of the body. So we need, as EPs, we need to know what these medications do, and then we need to educate patients. So, for example, if someone's on a beta blocker, which permanently changes while you're on the medication what your heart rate is doing, it lowers it by, I think it's 10 to 20 beats per minute. You can no longer use a heart rate based training session because your heart rate may not actually ever get to that. And if it gets to that, then you're probably actually, your working rate is actually a lot higher to actually get there. Same with if we've had an implant, if we've got a ICD, implanted cardiac defibrillator with pacemaker. That'll also change what's happening with the heart as well. So as an EP, if someone comes in with an ICD, first thing I do is write to the cardiologist, what rate will it go off at?
Yeah.
Because if someone gets within 10 to 15 beats per minute of that, I'm going to stop them exercising, because otherwise they're going to, as my patients have described it, get kicked in the chest by a horse when they're pacemaking or their defibrillator goes off.
I think the scariest thing is like when you have a patient, they come in with chronic heart failure, like your whole prescription can go out the window because you don't know how that heart is going to respond to any sort of exercise. While there is guidelines, chronic heart failure is one of the most unpredictable conditions that anyone can have, particularly through exercise, in my opinion.
Yeah. So to simplify, because obviously we are getting a bit in the weeds here with the terminology, so I like to always ask questions like as if we don't have degrees.
Yeah, of course.
Essentially, it's like exercise creates a stronger heart.
Yep.
Therefore, allowing the blood to flow better throughout the body, getting better like vasodilation, opening your valves more.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then that obviously in turn affects everything else.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And our blood vessels get more pliable, so it can open up or contract much better, all the way down to our little venules and veins, capillaries, and our muscles and our cells get better at using oxygen.
Would you say there's better because almost all exercise will kind of help improve it. Is there more optimal exercises that will help improve like cardiovascular fitness / prevention of cardiovascular diseases?
I think at the moment, high intensity interval training is getting really popular because it has very similar effects to those sort of longer term, moderate intensity continuous training or MICT, but it's compressed into that shorter time. And we're all time poor these days, so people are more likely to go into a 30-minute interval session on the rower versus a 2-hour run, because it's also just nicer to do. My feet and ankles don't like running, so I'm just like running. I'll pass on that. But yeah, I think these days a lot of people are moving towards that high intensity interval training, and interval training is safe to do when we're asymptomatic or even with some minor specific symptoms. When we've got heart failure, when we've had cardiac arrest, all these sorts of things. Depending on what's going on for the person, they're more than safe to train at those quite higher intensity levels, so long as they're asymptomatic and they're okay.
Would you say weights would still be beneficial?
Yeah, absolutely.
Resistance training, but would it be the less optimal one, or would you say, because when I was learning about everything, and obviously when I was doing bodybuilding as well, everyone thinks like, you just do weights and get jacked, but cardio actually helps you get more jacked.
Yeah.
Because cardio like we said, all the blood ways, it gets more oxygen, gets more carbs, all that sort of stuff. Would you say someone who prefers to do weights try and at least get like a list walk in, like a low intensity walk in, or run, or splash a rower in there, like 4 minutes of rowers, 20 on, 10 off or something?
Yeah, I'll definitely
absolutely, like a little Tabata session of some kind. Yeah,
something like that. Like I always try and push, look, if you love weights, that's great. Like I love weights as well, and would prefer it over cardio any day.
Same.
But heart health is so important just as much as brain health or liver health or kidney health. We need to maintain the function of the heart because it is the center of everything. And doing those smaller bouts like the 5-minute rower or 2 minutes on the stepper, just something to maintain cardiovascular health.
It's important to know as well when everyone have felt it. If you go and do 5 RM, your heart's going a million miles a minute after you've put that final weight down. So while we're doing specific cardiovascular training, we're working the cardiovascular system, but we're also working it when we're doing resistance training as well, just not to the same specificity that we would. But when we have, these conditions, we're typically generally looking at older populations. So there's a lot of comorbidities that go along with that resistance training is really good for, like osteopenia, sarcopenia, diabetes, these sorts of things. But yeah, anything. And I mean, it also looks at where's the crossover between what is resistance training and what is cardiovascular training. So think about jumping on the seated row and doing endurance muscular endurance session of, say 5 sets of 20 reps versus jumping on the rower and doing like a low intensity row? Where does that crossover happen? And the research isn't quite there on where that happens. So we know that any form of training that raises the heart level is going to be good for your cardiovascular system, basically. Yeah.
But yeah, for all the weight bros, it wouldn't hurt to throw a 4-minute rowing.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Throw
Do
a
it.
banner in there. Absolutely. Like
Just do it.
it's
You'll
Spin
be
bike,
4 minutes,
rower.
man.
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah.
Assault bike if you want to vomit.
Yeah. Is there any early signs, let's say normal Gen Pop person, like I work out, I have no issues. Is there any maybe early indications of CVD that might present when I'm exercising, like I can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, there's the shortness of breath. There's like accelerated heart rate, confusion, dizziness, everything like. It'll be very mild to start off with, and it'll build gradually. And then, unfortunately, once it builds, it will hit you with a stage where it will hit you point blank, and you'll know it before.
One of the big things as well is exercise-induced angina or that sort
chest
of
pain.
Yeah, chest pain, those sorts of things. For females, sometimes it can present as period pain. So if you're exercising and you start getting period pain, you stop exercising and it goes away within a couple of minutes, maybe start to look at, okay, something else is going on here because that's not normal. But also we might look at things like nocturnal dyspnea. So are you waking up in the night feeling like you're drowning? Which is different to, say, where you need a CPAP machine, so that's sleep apnea. How many pillows are you propping yourself up on? We might look at the person's lower limbs and go, okay, well, there's a bit of pitting edema there. And so we can start to pick up on those external signs that something's not quite right. That shortness of breath where you wouldn't expect shortness of breath is a real big one. And that sensation of fatigue, so you start doing an exercise that you've done 1,000 times and it might only just be warm-up weight, but you feel like you've just done a 3RM and you're like, oh, something's not quite right. That's when we go, okay, something might be going on with the heart here.
And that's obviously more because obviously some days when you feel flat as, you'll feel that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If you get that consistently, you're like, oh, hang on a minute. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so I want to move on to the last sort of field subject, which would be cancer. Once again, different cancers, different treatments, all that sort of jazz. We know that exercise, we get told that exercise helps reduce cancer as a general. How so?
So I think it's really important to remember that everyone has the ability to develop cancer. Cancer is already in the body. Whether it metastasizes or not is a different story. And basically how exercise can help is more so like if you eat right, that's going to help improve the production of antibodies and limiting your risk of cancer. But if you have a family history of breast cancer or bowel cancer, it can lower your statistics, but it's not 100%. So oncology is one of those ones where you're going to take it at face value and build yourself up. Like I've known people who have exercised day in and day out. They eat right. They do everything, still get hit with terminal cancer. Like there is no stopping this without being too negative. You can definitely help yourself, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I guess it's more like, what can I do that might help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more that reducing or increasing the amount of time that you have before that condition starts affecting you.
Yeah.
But also once that condition does start affecting you, you're starting from a higher base. So you've got further to go before you lose your ability to do certain things. And I think it's important to touch on what Bec mentioned in terms of cancer in the body. If you have a cancer present, if we can get to that quickly and aggressively before it metastasizes, that's when we can generally try and isolate it. Some cancers metastasize very, very quickly. So melanoma typically will pretty much present straight away as metastasizing very, very quickly once it's found or begins. But the process of cancer occurring basically is that the telomeres, which are the little ends of our DNA strands that replicate, something goes wrong in them because they literally run out. So every time DNA replicates, it takes a little bit off that end. Once that's run out, that's when things start to go wrong. Or when there's a mutation from external things such as UV rays, excessive exposure to radiation, these sorts of things. Smoking, absolutely. That damage. So every time the body needs to, smoking's a perfect one to sort of talk about, I guess. The same with vaping and smoking, similar effect. In that, the reason that smoking causes a lot of sort of esophageal or lung cancer is because when you're smoking, you're doing damage to the cells that line your lungs, and your airway, not your esophagus. And essentially, once that damage is done, the body needs to repair that. And if it's repairing at a faster rate, it means that those cells are dividing at a faster rate, which means the telomeres are getting chopped off at a faster rate, which is why we see increased rates of cancers in people who do have these addictions. So like smoking, heavy drinking is another one where we see it. Other drug use, so cannabis, these sorts of things. There's some correlation between there as well. And then things like silicosis, so people who've been working in mines or working with asbestos or like those stone bench tops and that sort of stuff these days that have recently been banned in Australia, I think. Same sort of thing. So they're breathing in all these fine particles which are doing damage, which the body then needs to go and repair, but also seal off those particles that are stuck in the lungs. And same sort of process is happening there, that it's having to regenerate those cells really, really fast. And that's where we get those telomeres shortening a lot quicker. Yeah.
So does your body only have like X amount of those? Is it telomeres?
Telomeres, on the end of the DNA strands,
So it has X amount, and then once it runs out, that's when you potentially run into issues.
Yes, yeah. And there's a lot of research being done, particularly in the UK, I think here in Australia as well, because we're the number one skin cancer in the country. On number one skin cancer country on the planet. In terms of looking at, okay, how can we, reduce or increase the length of those artificially? What can we do? Anything? Is there any sort of medications that we can take? Is there any sort of food or lifestyle modifications that we can put in that help to improve those? And once again, we come back to those 5 pillars where we see that really good sleep, really good exercise and diet all help in terms of that, and stress management as well.
So would you say there's no, how would I word this? Mm-hmm. Like exercise, the reason it helps not prevent, but maybe delay, if you're kind of inevitably going to get it, cancer, is because you're doing all the things that create a healthier body.
Yes.
And then that healthier body is able to fight it off quicker or repair quicker, or put you in a better position that if you are diagnosed, you're not already overweight with CVD, and then you're much a higher risk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Nailed it. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think like originally, like when cancer got really, really big, the initial prescription was no exercise. It was to stay in bed. It was to do nothing. And now, like, you have people who are even on dialysis, like they are on bikes while they're getting dialysis, or like people in the oncology, you're going to have exercise physiologists do the session while the person's in bed or anything like that.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Because, if they're on that chemotherapy and you're increasing the rate at which the blood and that specific drug are getting pumped around the body, then it's more likely to get to the tumour. But there's also the antibodies that are produced in the muscle cells that themselves will go and target the cancer.
That's it.
So it's really cool.
Yeah, nice. Is there any indications that may show while exercising that you might have something going on cancer-wise?
So like it's sort of like what we touched on with cardiovascular disease. Like you'll be more tired for no reason at all. There'll be things that really stick out to you that didn't want that before. So it won't be like as simple as like, oh, there's like a lump on my skin or something like that. There'll be really obvious signs that will point out that something is not right. A lot of people say, oh, pain. It's like, no, cancer does not start with pain. It has the potential to, but it will be signs that will come out of the blue but are obvious, if that makes sense.
So fatigue is one.
Fatigue is one.
I feel like fatigue is the biggest one.
It's the biggest one, yeah. So that'd be the most
Completely
obvious.
unexplained fatigue.
Yeah, completely unexplained. Like, nothing out of the ordinary. You can't willily explain, like, why you're so fatigued. Like, you haven't gone for a marathon or anything like that. But, like, yeah, just, like, sneaky little things post that as well.
And then there's some cancers, like, that are really hard to pick up in that early stage. So pancreatic cancer is one of them, which is one of the reasons it has the highest mortality rate, is because it's so hard to pick up early that by the time it's picked up, it's almost too late already. But then there's some cancers that present very, very early on and you can pick them up. So, things like bladder cancer or bowel cancer, you might start to see things like blood in the urine or stool and you go, oh, something's not right here.
Yep.
Let's go and get it checked out. They do a scope and go, there's a little something growing in there. Cut that out or cut around it slightly. Hopefully it hasn't metastasized. They do like a good check on it to see.
Yeah.
And then there's things like, your skin cancers as well. Lots of different types. Some of them don't metastasize for quite a while. Some of them, like melanoma, metastasize very, very quickly. And because of the way the melanoma works, you can expose... So melanoma is typically caused from the UVB... I think it is UVA or UVB.
The sun.
The sun basically, and tanning beds as well. That's not
they're
the
the
tanning
worst.
beds.
So that's why they're banned now.
That's exactly. Well, there's new ones that are coming in. They've got a new name, but basically they're the same. It causes the damage to the skin, but the skin that's exposed won't necessarily be where the melanoma presents or the cancer presents. It might present on the base of someone's foot. Which again, who's staring at the base of their feet all the time? Hardly anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And then things like, where we might see unusual pain is things like radiating pain across the back that starts in like one little corner and then starts to spread across the back. And that's when we're sort of starting to go, okay, something's not right, because pain wouldn't usually do that unless something else is happening.
Yeah.
So that's when we might see things like kidney cancer.
Just remind me, metastasizing is the spreading part?
Yeah.
So the cancer will grow in an area where it's being
looked after, so to speak.
Looked after a little bit.
Yeah.
It's got all the things it needs.
It's got all the things it
Yeah.
needs. Yeah.
Then sometimes the cancer, what happens is a little piece of that cancer will literally fall off it and come into the bloodstream. Once that happens, wherever that cancer, that little piece goes, it will generally ends up in the lungs or the brain, because the capillaries are so fine that we will see it metastasize. And so it breaking off and moving somewhere else, that's the process of metastasizing.
And so that's kind of when you start to be a bit fucked, right? Because then it's like, it could go anywhere.
Yes.
And now it's in this,
100%
and now it's in your
correct.
lymph node, and now it's in your brain. And
And that's why your blood cancers are your most dangerous, because they will travel everywhere. Anywhere.
Systemic. That's where things like once it's metastasized, I'll look at lymph nodes, blood, and lymph nodes, lungs, and brain. If it doesn't get caught in the lungs, it'll typically go up to the brain,
upstairs,
or the lymph nodes. And that's where if we see someone who's never smoked or been sort of exposed to those, those particles in the air, that does all of a sudden get lung cancer, we go, oh, what's going on? Because we wouldn't typically think that someone would get lung cancer if they haven't been exposed to those pollutants in the lungs. So we'll look at that and we'll go, okay, we'll treat this, but we're going to scan your whole body. And generally, we find there's something somewhere else.
All right, we'll do a little another little bonus one. We'll just touch on pregnancy for a little bit. Maybe not necessarily something you guys always work with. But I know that there can be a lot of misinformation, especially the old information about pregnancy and training, where you're basically told to do nothing, but now we know it's the complete opposite.
Yes, absolutely.
Please continue to exercise.
Strong mums have strong bums.
So a common one is, we've kind of touched on it with all of the stuff we're talking about. The fitter and stronger you are, the better it is. So in terms of pregnancy, when you are already training, you obviously continue that training. That's going to either help you get through the pregnancy and or help recover quicker post-birth. I have heard a few different things. Maybe you can touch on it. If you aren't training, so you don't normally exercise, and then you get pregnant, is it ideal to start training then? Or because I've heard both, like yes and no.
So yes is the answer. So it's safe to start at pretty much any phase except when you're basically about to give birth. So that's sort of the third trimester, last phase of that third trimester. That's when let's start easing off. Or if we're thinking about starting exercise, let's just hold off until after the birth. We can still do those exercises like the Kegels, so the pelvic floor activation, contracting, relax, trying to build sort of strength in other areas. But when we look at sort of initially getting pregnant, if you've never exercised before and you were thinking about it and then you've fallen pregnant, you're perfectly safe to start exercise. It's just that where your starting point is will be lower. And we're going to start looking at, okay, let's train you so that you're strong for when you do have bub. And then once you've had bub and bub's out and is healthy and happy and whatnot, then let's get into our much bigger stuff after that. So that post-recovery. Because there's a lot of considerations as well. Cardiovascular considerations, eating considerations. We're literally eating for 2.
Calorie intake,
we're pumping our heart for 2. We're also looking at, at certain phases. So third trimester, you can't lie on your back because venous return gets cut off by the bub. Mother has no more heartbeat. That's not a good thing. And then looking at as well sort of abdominal strength. If someone's looking at they're trying to work towards having a baby, focusing on abdominal strength and pelvic floor strength is really good. Then once we fall pregnant, maintaining and slowly building, reducing that so that we reduce the risk of diastasis recti, which is where we have that separation of the we have the separation of the rectus abdominis muscle because it literally just gets pushed out of the way.
You're talking about ab separation.
Absolutely. But when we're doing that training, we're increasing the strength and capacity of that muscle so that once we've had the baby, we can come back to it even stronger.
But I think a really important thing is the postpartum depression. So when you do have your baby and you're trying to get back into the gym, it is going to be significantly harder for you. And it's okay to be that way. You've just gone through this amazing process of giving birth, but your body's not going to be at 100%. Don't beat yourself up about it. I think it's a huge thing to sort of put onto women is it's okay. Don't have a meltdown about it.
that self-compassion thing is really important.
Yeah, self-compassion. But also...
And reaching out to, psychology team as well, so important.
But also when you are pregnant, the gestational diabetes is another one as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So like we've mentioned before, diabetes loves resistance training, but when you have gestational, the pathophysiology is different. So basically you can't push yourself too hard to the point that baby gets suffocated or baby has gets high blood pressure when they're born or anything like that. So just sort of the different things that can go wrong will go wrong, and just to be more aware and talking with your GP and your midwife about what you can do and what your options are, and also going to I think pair exercise physiology.
They're really good.
The specialisation in women's health and pelvic floor training.
Yeah. The other thing to know as well is that we as mentioned earlier, we have a lot of stress in our natural environment these days, being a very built environment. But it's important to know that exercise itself is a stressor, certain types. So if we're already really highly strung and we go into a high intensity session, we're just going to build on that cortisol. And we have bubs these days that are coming into the world that are so hyped up on cortisol that they struggle. There's a lot of research going into looking at if babies are born with really high cortisol levels, what sort of implications does that have on neurodevelopment, that sort of stuff, personality development? Are they more prone to having a stress-based psychological condition? And there is some evidence to show there's some correlation between those. So we look at we're now pregnant. What can we do to help relax you and bring those stresses down? So if we are still working and we're going to the gym and we have a really stressful job, maybe hitting that high intensity stuff is probably not the best. Particularly as we get further into the pregnancy, we're going to have less capacity anyway, and it's generally we want to start toning, reducing the intensity that we're doing anyway. Because we're already, we've now got 4.5, 5, 6 kilos on our front already, giving us stress on our back. Want to look at those more gentle modes of exercise. So your Pilates is really good. Your gentle walks, bike riding, these sorts of things.
That lower intensity weights as well,
Yeah.
as opposed to like your high intensity classes and stuff.
Exactly, endurance-based weights rather than going for your 1RMs or your HIIT.
Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest thing is like always talking to your doctor and midwife.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's pregnancy is different, especially all the things that can happen. And B is like, I think you touched on it there, is listening to your body. Like everything you're already doing, you can continue to do.
Yep.
The first trimester is probably more about morning sicknesses than it is about physical limitations.
Yep.
That's it. Yep.
And then and just feeling like shit.
Yep.
And then the second trimester is obviously where we get a bit of belly and maybe separation and that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to just remember, like, you can pretty much keep doing what you're doing, but you're going to be lowering 30% less load, or it's going to be slower and all that sort of stuff. And just being mindful, like, I feel like shit today. Okay, well, don't train today. Rest. Like, you're growing a human inside of you, which is
it's
wild.
a big job.
And so, you have to increase that calorie intake and then rest. And
I think another good thing to point out is like the anatomy behind pregnancy as well. There are a lot of women who are CrossFitters or like they do high rocks and everything, like they get pregnant and the bump actually doesn't develop as much. So there's two ways you can look at it. You can look at the baby is now being developed into the spine, which can cause complications down into birth. But also, even if you're not developing the bump as much as other women are, it does not mean that the baby is unhealthy. It just means that your body, you have your rectus abdominis, it is strong, and the baby's able to grow within inside at a different rate and at different sizes as well. So I think a lot of women get criticism because they're not keeping up with the norm, stuff like that.
Oh, they get criticised for breastfeeding or for not breastfeeding or for bottle feeding, for not bottle. Everyone's a commentator, and it's like, it's not your pregnancy. Let her do it the way she wants to do it. So long as Bub and Mum are happy and healthy, let them go. Leave them
for sure. And then training before will help, obviously, as you guys mentioned, during pregnancies, like in terms of, especially as the belly gets bigger. If it does get bigger, you can carry it around. And then recovery. Like I've noticed when I used to have a few athletes, like I had an Australian netballer once. 6 weeks, 7 weeks. She's like, I'm ready to train. I'm like, you're not. She's like, I am ready.
No.
It was like, when this was F45. And then there was like a jumping exercise. I'm like, don't do that. She's like, no, I can do it. And then did like 2 hops. And she went, yep, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wee my pants.
You were humbled very quickly.
But where I was going with that is she was ready 6 weeks in, physically ready, and that helps with the recovery.
That's it, 100%.
Cool.
It's very much that intuitive movement. How do you feel today? Do you feel that you can do something? Okay, give it a try. If it feels good, go for it. If it feels like it might cause pain or you're concerned or have any sort of, second thoughts, cut it away, find something slightly different to do.
We're not Olympic athletes.
That's exactly it.
It's better just to not do that exercise today. Go for a walk instead if your body feels off.
Yeah, exactly. Drop the weights by 30-40% or whatever feels, that's the reason we do warm-ups, is to, I'll do my warm-up. Okay, how do I feel with warm-up? Feels heavy. Cool, go light. Feels easy. Go heavy. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, into our top 3 moments, which I ask pretty much the same questions to each guest. So we'll just do both answer it. Is there anything for you in your career that's really stood out as either a patient that you helped and it was like, that was one of the best clients I've ever worked with because of X, or, oh my God, I got to work with this? What's been a highlight for you?
For me, it's more the hypermobility and the EDS patients, so Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Basically, these people are often criticised and told their conditions in their head, and I give them the opportunity to have a voice and be able to refer to the right specialist, but also allowing them to say that, yes, you have this condition, but we can work past it and it's not in your head. So just sort of like giving them their voice back with it has been the most rewarding thing in that aspect.
Yeah, that's cool. That'd be powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for me, working that patient I mentioned earlier who could barely squat, getting them to do squats. Now they're doing like trap-bar deadlifts and all that sort of stuff, which is awesome. Getting them back into movement, whereas before they were very apprehensive about movement. They're now enjoying movement so much now that I'm treating them for exercise addiction, which is fun. And it's primary, so there's a mental health condition driving that. But other moments I would say would be working with someone who had PTSD. They came into the clinic one day and they were very agitated. Something to do with their credit card details or something had been stolen. They were really hyped up and they're like, I just want to hit the boxing bag today. I was like, I don't think that's going to be the best thing for you. We need to down-regulate you. So I put them on the Pilates reformer. They'd never done Pilates. They're a veteran. They were just like, Pilates, that's for old ladies and women. Nah. It's not for old ladies and women, I can tell you now. As my legs are really sore this afternoon and this morning. But I got them on there and I was getting them to do mindful movement. So matching their slow, controlled movement with their breath, and it down-regulated them and they felt so much better. So beforehand, they were sort of off, a bit dissociated, focusing on other stuff. I'll find this person, I'll bash them, I'll get them. And at the end of the session, they're like, I feel so much better now, so much more level-headed. I can see now that, my details got stolen because they figured out why. They're like, it's okay because the bank caught it before anything got, taken away. These things happen. It's, modern life, details are insecure all the time. And they're like, thanks so much for that. That's exactly what I needed. And they continue to come back to the sessions every single day. So it gave them an understanding of there's something else that you can do when you're hyped up and feeling agitated. And it really helped me to, reinforce it. Yes, the model of the brain and using that default mode versus central executive to really switch us from one can help down-regulate all those emotions and feelings and thought patterns that come with that, even in a condition such as PTSD, where we do see dissociation and, these sorts of things.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice that you've read, heard, been told, or whatever that's stuck with you forever? Could be work related, could be general life related. Just banger, a bit of Mr. Miyagi.
Good question. Yeah. Do you want to start?
I'm still
it's like, not really.
Not really.
Pat the dogs.
I guess it's not really advice. It's the fact that a lot of people go into exercise physiology thinking that exercise is great, everything's all, and it is, it's 100%. The real kicker is when you meet people who have never exercised and you have to try and convince them to exercise. So the process of you changing that person's mindset is mind-blowing, but be prepared for backlash, I feel. So not everyone's going to love exercise, and that is a challenge in itself, particularly those with chronic diseases.
Yeah.
It's a different ball game.
I bet.
Yeah, that'd be my piece of advice.
I think mine is more dog care. That's probably my dog.
Oh, yeah.
It's Kelpie hair. I think mine is probably a bit more general. Mine's probably it was in my brain a moment ago. Now it's gone. What is it? Self-care is not selfish. The self-care doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. And understanding what you need in any one moment is the most important thing. Once you can tune in to what your body, your mind, your soul, if you're spiritual, what your spirit needs, then that is the most important thing, because then you are living your life for yourself, not for someone else, which is so important for everyone, not just our clinical conditions like, borderline or PTSD or some other sort of codependent relationship behaviors that we see. But it's important because your life is the only one you get, and the only person that can make you happy is yourself. Really?
Yeah, nice. Agreed.
Yeah.
So last one, you said the book before. What was that book before?
Explain Pain.
Explain Pain. Yeah.
Yep.
So besides that one, what's a piece of content you could have consumed recently or whatever? It doesn't have to be EP related. Once again, world related.
Yep.
What's a piece of content you consume, potty, book, or whatever, that you'd recommend everyone should listen to or read or whatever?
Andrew might hate me for saying this. Like The Body Keeps Score is definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
Great book.
It is a book. It's a trauma-based book. Basically, it's a book that shows you how you may have gotten over your trauma, but the body will always keep score on that trauma, and that's how your body responds, or how you will respond to any sort of future issues that may arrive, whether it's a new trauma or whether you're asking yourself, why is my body acting this way when my trauma was 20 years ago? It doesn't matter. The body remembers always. And I beg people to go read that book. Like Andrew recommended it to me once upon a time, and you can buy it from BW like $25.
Yeah.
Easy, accessible. Do it.
It's a really good book. It is quite some of the content in it is quite confronting. There isn't a trigger warning, but there's some content in there that is, for people who have experienced, certain types of trauma, particularly as children. There's a lot in there that might slap you in the face a bit. But basically it talks about the history of post-traumatic stress disorder, those sort of diagnoses, and then looking at developmental trauma disorder and how addressing the person's symptoms rather than putting them into little boxes of, borderline personality, or, there's so many other specific disorders like oppositional defiance disorder. When you look at the symptoms of the person, how about let's treat the symptoms based on the unhealed inner child versus putting them in this little box and then treating them the way this box tells us to treat this person.
Yeah.
Because treating the symptoms and helping them heal their inner child is how you're going to fix, what's going on for them now. Yeah. So I'd definitely recommend it as well. It's a good one. But another one I'd recommend for anyone who's into like relationship stuff is Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity. Very interesting book, looking at sort of modern relationships, what they look like, the dynamics, and the way the dynamics in a traditional male-female nuclear family have changed since feminism has come about, and the emancipation of women in terms of working and finances and all that sort of stuff, and the way that we as people in society haven't kept up with that change, and we're still expecting certain things of certain genders without realizing that that shifted because of that in both genders to benefit both. It's a very interesting book. Definitely give it a look. She's done TEDx talks, all that sort of stuff. She's got 2 different podcasts as well. And then I guess the other one on a similar topic is 8 Dates by the Gottmans. It talks about the 8 most common topics that people have issues in their relationships and relationships break down on, and how to have those conversations in meaningful and productive ways that place no blame on either party, but bringing the 2 people together to work against the issue rather than bringing 2 people together to butt heads. Yeah, it's a really good book.
Yeah, nice.
Highly recommend it.
Sound interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great. Go check them out.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank both of you for coming on today.
That's right.
Thank you.
Been very informative. It's been good. And I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, eh? It's been great.